Get Pucked. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Get Pucked podcast. Matt, Dave, Vito, and Greg.
Full house.
Full house. Second time ever. Very excited. And of course, I'm extremely excited to talk to you guys today. This is 24 hours later from a blockbuster trade. I think it's fair to say it's a blockbuster. If you haven't heard already, which I'm sure if you're listening to our podcast in August, talking about the Montreal Canadiens, you have heard, but just to be a completionist, Patrik Laine. We may have talked about him in the past, I think, gents, perhaps.
No, stop.
Yeah. Well,
we did not. Come on.
Just feel free to go back and look at the tapes. But he is now a Montreal Canadian. And a second-round pick was thrown in to the Canadiens in exchange for Jordan Harris. Now, this is monster. I mean, I'm going to give you guys the round table real fast because I want to hear your takes on it now that we know exactly what the trade was for. We're not going to rehash exactly everything we talked about last time. Please, if you're listening, feel free to go listen to our thoughts about 2-3 weeks ago before this happened. You're welcome to listen. And then again, 2 months ago when we were talking about this, that Laine might be a good target. But now that it's happened, now that the dust has settled and you've had about a day to digest, Greg, how do you feel about this trade?
I mean, I had already changed a little bit of my opinion last time around when I got asked this, and it was all about what was going to be the return. And depending on the return, I could say like whether I like the move or not. And I was like, okay, what if we include like Jacky in a high pick? And then, but looking at it now, I mean, I don't see how we could potentially like. I don't see the negative. What negative we could say about this move? I think there's a lot to like. Obviously, just I think Harris for a second is very good value. I think it's pretty much like if we got Laine at negative value, pretty much. So I think I really like the return, obviously, and I'm really looking forward to see what he can do. And obviously, I think just the return puts a lot less pressure on Patrik, because if he was traded for a huge package, it would have been he would have to live up to whatever was going the other way, and so now it's kind of the opposite of that. I think though he's trying to purposely put pressure on himself by saying he's going to score 40 or 50 or whatever, and that's his goal. So I think that wasn't the smartest thing to do in his first interview, but I like the confidence.
I got to just quickly pick up on that because I thought that was a great thing he did. Not so much to come across as like I liked a little bit of the cockiness. I know a lot of people were concerned about him, again, going into the player assistance program and everything that he did. And we don't know the full nature of that. But just when you talk about that, you want a player to have a little bit of swagger and confidence. And I love that he came out of the gate saying something like that. He's like, I don't want to come back as a 30 and 40 goal scorer. I want to be a 50 goal scorer. Something like that is, to me, I love that. But I'll get to me in a second. Dave, how do you feel about this?
Well, I absolutely love it. Obviously, I was one of the guys advocating on this podcast that Patrik Laine was should have been a target for the Canadiens, and I'm happy to see. The deal is better than anyone could have drawn up or anyone could have imagined. I think if anyone had drawn this up in one of the forums or on X or anything, I think a lot of people would have been, railing on them for how unfair this trade was. I think that it's a home run in my books, even if it doesn't pan out. And I'm a strong believer, and I think that it will pan out. And yeah, to touch on his cockiness and his swag, like he's a guy who I think lost his mojo along the way, right? I was reading up a little bit on the scouting reports of him early on before he became an NHLer. And he was a guy who was always engaged. And when he played against McDavid, there was an anecdote, and I forget, pardon me, because I forget who brought this up, but I was reading somewhere that there was, he would always give McDavid a little extra nudge every time he played against them. And he just wanted to be the best. And he wanted to score, he wanted the puck. And I think he went to Winnipeg, not to rail on Winnipeg's market, but I think that it wasn't the right probably fit for him. There was a lot of locker room talk about how there was stuff going on in there. Obviously, then he gets shipped to Columbus, which I mean isn't the most motivating market either to play in. And I think he's just a guy who probably lost his way a little bit. And to see him have a little bit of that swagger back, I think you need that. And I think him playing, I mean, look, we'll talk about this, I'm sure, ad nauseum, but like I'm still not 100% sold on Marty St. Louis. But if there's one thing Marty St. Louis is good at, I feel like this is the perfect fit for a guy like Marty St. Louis and Patrik Laine. I think they will, he will get the best out of Patrik Laine. I have no doubt about it. And I think that this is just an amazing move for the Montreal Canadiens. It makes them exciting. It makes, I'm sure his jersey sales will go up. He's a must watch. And I speak a lot to Brian Wild and Simon Salikis, and we always talk about goals, right? Look at that.
There it is, 92.
He's going to cover it. He's going to cover it already. I love it, Greg. But they talk about the need for goals, right? And you need goals. And for a long, long time in this market, you're lacking goals. So here's a guy is a chance, a 40-goal scorer, a 30-goal scorer, and a guy who's, we talk about how he had a bit of a downfall in Columbus, but he was still a point-a-game player virtually in Columbus with nothing going on there. So I think this is a guy who's going to bring goals and just get people out of their seats and a must-watch. And I think it's very, very important for this fan base. I think it's very important for the development of this team. And I think that he could be a key piece. It's still a risk. Don't get me wrong. Not really a risk, but it's still like we're taking a flyer on a guy, and he still has to prove that his mental game is there. But I absolutely love it.
I don't think I could have agreed more. I'll add to it a touch after. Vito?
I wrote a few times from the podcast account on X or Facebook that if they would have traded Harris for a third or a fourth, it was already a steal. It was already something good. Not to discredit Harris. He was a good, serviceable player, but the fact is that at the end of the day, Montreal had too many left-hand defensemen. There was no place for him. So, and he pretty much played as a 5, 6, or 7 at times throughout the season. So when you look at his value, I figured a third or a fourth round pick for him would have been fair. Instead, he gets moved for literally a second round pick for Patrik Laine and a second round pick. So it's like, for me, that value, to Greg's point, the fact that he got traded for something like that, it's only positive. Now, some people will hammer down the cap number and his cap hit and all that. The way you have to kind of look at it as 1.4 came out with Harris and essentially 8.7 comes in, but a net result of 7.3. So you have to play the numbers there, and it was a very good transaction. There's nothing to hate about the trade. Anybody who hates on it is just focusing on the negatives. They're focusing on the fact that they're calling him a cancer in the room and all these things, and they don't know him. They don't know what really happened. They don't know. They just see that he's going on his third team. And to Dave's point, now we don't know. Like those were very questionable markets to begin with. It's not to say that the Columbus is a bad organization with a bad fan base. It's just that there was definitely some question marks there, and there's things starting to surface up in the media now and on social media and all that stuff. So there's nothing to hate now. When you look at the team itself, when was the last time that the Montreal Canadiens in their top 6 had 2 potential 35-plus goal scorers, 30 to 35 or even 40?
You got Suzuki too.
And there's Suzuki who actually hit 33 goals. We haven't seen this kind of firepower in the top 6 or potential. I'm going to call it potential because there are still some unknowns there in quite some time. The last pairing that I could think of on the top 6 that had potential threat of that, and it was all of 18 games, was Vanek and Pacioretty. That's it. I have not seen scoring threats like that for the Montreal Canadiens in quite some time. They needed goals. They needed size. They got that with Patrik Laine. Now, he still has to put it all together, but at the end of the day, the guy still posted up. While he was hurt and while he went to the player assistance program and all of that stuff, we all know it, he posted up 117 points in 129 games, in his last 129 games. He's doing great. And I think he was on pace. He had a 0.50 points per game pace in that span of time too. So when you look at it, the guy's still scoring goals even on a Columbus team that basically nothing was happening there. So there's nothing you could possibly hate about this trade whatsoever. If he would have been traded for something key, a key piece similar to back then, I know he's one of your favorite players, Greg. But like Sergachev for Joy, something of that magnitude, we would have been hearing it like crazy, especially if Laine would have had a down year going next year, if you were to have one. But instead, you're looking at this and saying there's nothing you can possibly lose. It's a low risk, high reward situation, and it's for 2 years, Matt. You beat that drum. It's for 2 years, and he's 26. People forget that he's 26 years old. There's not a guy that's 30, 31, 32. He's 26.
Look, guys, I think it's a terrible trade. No, I mean, we talked about it last time. We'll rehash it a little bit now. You're all saying the same thing. I think the key takeaways here, the thing that a lot of people that might have been skeptical about any kind of trade involving the Canadiens and the Blue Jackets to get Laine would be, like Greg was suggesting initially, it was all about what's going the other way. A fear that you'd be giving up a first and maybe a jack guy and maybe something. We didn't know what the market was necessarily for a guy like that. We didn't know how many other teams were out there that were coveting a player like that. We had rumblings. We had heard a bunch of things, like we were hearing in the rumor mill that the Habs were interested. But there was always in the back of our head, we would do it. I think all of us agreed we wanted Laine from weeks and months ago, but not at any cost. The fact is, you basically got him, with all due respect, at no cost. Jordan Harris was a rotating in sixth defenseman. Does he have a ceiling? Can he be a 3-4 guy? I hope he does. I have nothing but time for Jordan Harris. I thought he was a really good kid. I thought what he was bringing on and off the ice was very respectable. But fact remains, we have other Jordan Harrises. To your point, Vito, we do not have a Patrik Laine on this team. We don't. We have Cole Caulfield, who is supposed to be a guy that can score like that, but he hasn't yet. And to Dave's point of view, if you haven't done it yet, you haven't done it yet. You can't bank on that. Now, we have a lot of aspirations. It's a young team. You mentioned Vito. He's a 26-year-old, but he's a 26-year-old vet. He came in at 18. He's already been around the block quite a while now, and he's put up the big points. And what I like so much about this player is that he comes back. What I feel personally from watching his press conference yesterday, from listening to Kent Hughes and how he explained the due diligence that him and Gorton did when they were looking and had the ability to speak to him and speak to his agent and speak to everybody around to give it a full picture of what the guy's like now. Everybody seems to be on the page that he's in the right place mentally and physically. He's coming back with a chip on his shoulder, a little bit of that swagger like Dave was suggesting. And when you come to this market, when you come to here, you come in, we don't as Montreal Canadiens fans wait to say, show me, and then we bring you up. We bring you up right away. He will have never played, never, I assure you, on any stage that will make him feel as welcome and as powerful as the Montreal Canadiens fan base are going to do. He's going to come on that ice on opening night with the torches and the things that we do better than anybody else. And I promise you, this guy's going to have himself like
speeches.
But it's the facts, my friend. And I can't believe people are out there saying like that this would be a bad thing, that him coming into the team makes the team worse, that it's overpay. Okay. Come on, man.
Hold on.
This is wins top to bottom, left and right.
There were rumors that at the draft, Montreal was potentially going to trade the 21st overall pick before Michael Hage came around, and something else, which I'm not sure what the something else is, for Trevor Zegras. I'm telling you right now, I'd rather this trade for Laine that just happened by a country mile over Zegras. In fact, as a player, I'd rather Patrik Laine than Trevor Zegras.
Obviously, I mean, I don't think that's
so when you look at it that way, for those that were trying to go up that Zegras tree and saying that they wanted Zegras, that Montreal should get it because he's a high-skilled guy. Yes, he's a high-skilled guy, but there's way more upside potential with somebody like Patrik Laine, former second overall Patrik Laine, than Trevor Zegras.
He's done it. Zegras hasn't done it yet. He's got the potential. We looked at it. I'm not trying to poo-poo on Zegras. I was also a guy that says if they can make that deal work, where you're not giving up a ton of stuff, you make that work too. I was all for that. But Patrik Laine has done it. This is somebody who was already there. The man said it himself. He says it wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a fluke that he did it. He's got the skill. He just has to be in the right environment with the right
one of the best
cast.
shots in the entire NHL.
I'm telling you guys, I mean, and to Dave's point, to come back to it, just to go to the other side of it quick, if it doesn't work out, right? This is what the naysayers are saying. All the comments out there, all the people are like, oh, yeah, but it's not going to work out. Oh, he's bust. He's washed up. And you barely sacrificed anything to get him. You got a sweetener to take him to take the full contract load, which you can afford. You're going to be able to weaponize your cap space next season when more guys come off the books. It's a 2-year contract.
Don't forget.
Come on.
Montreal's done all of this and has all these prospects, has all these assets, has the top 6 that they have, has all the defensive players playing right now too, and they still have all those draft picks in the next 2 years. It
behooves me to understand how somebody could think about this now that it's been done. I give you 2 weeks ago when we were getting people and we were reading and seeing people being very, very anti-Laine about coming here, mostly because what people were expecting the cost to be. But now that you know what it was, how anybody out there can look at this and say that this is a bad move. It might not pan out. It's a calculated risk. It's a very low risk, and it is an exceptionally high reward. How anybody can look at this in a negative light, I just don't think they understand hockey.
Or they're Leafs fans.
Wow, whatever. Okay, listen, you can bust balls all you want. To me, this makes the team more exciting all season. This makes the team better across the board. You get to bring players down a bit further in your lineup. It rounds out your top 6. If he hits, you can start to figure out what a line with Laine and Demidov might look like in the next 2 years.
Okay. So these are all the positives. I want to hear. I'm sure you guys have some concerns. Greg, Dave, Matt? What are your concerns?
I mean, it's obviously like the media and all that. The criticize that he could receive is the concern, but it's infinitely like less likely now, or it's going to be less intense now that we know what we gave up for him. So I think that was my concern. Like if we tried a lot for him and then he doesn't perform and he doesn't back check and he's lazy, whatever. But honestly, like just Jordan Harris, if we traded him for a 20-goal scorer, I think everyone would have been happy. And now we're getting someone that can score more, and we got a second for him as well. So I think, people are going to maybe like criticize him about his production in relation to his salary. But I think we were able to take that salary at this time. It's only 2 years. We can renegotiate in 2 years. And if it goes well, I think we're going to keep that, like that hierarchy, hierarchy, yeah, with like Suzuki, and he's gonna get that kind of deal too. And so I think like my concerns are when I read the notification about the trade, I couldn't help but just laugh because of how like absurd it looked like. So my concerns are a lot less. I'm just a lot less concerned than I would have been if it was a different scenario in which he was coming.
Look, Greg nailed it on the concern. Maybe a little bit about the salary. You could kind of needle on that a little bit, but who cares? At the end of the day, in 2 years, when this team is actually going to be contending for something or other, that salary could come off the books if it ends up being a disaster. And I don't think it will end up becoming a disaster. The only thing that you could worry about is mental health and what's going on there. But last time I spoke with Greg. I mean, he mentioned the good point about Pascal Vincent and his connection there and the due diligence that was probably going to get done on and I'm sure it did. And I'm not sure. I didn't watch the press conference. I'm gonna be totally honest. I did not watch the press conference, but I don't know if anybody asked that question. But if I was in that, if I was still at 690 and I was still asking questions, that would have been a question.
They did. They did. Asked. They asked it, and he was very coy about saying who he talked to and what he spoke about.
Okay.
Yeah,
What did
in-
you specifically say?
in my opinion, it was a little bit weird how we like handled that
Was
question.
it?
He was asked many times, and it just seemed like he didn't want to talk about who he talked to and what they told him. So I'm not sure. Like Pascal Vincent, I'm just not sure what his opinion on Laine is, but it's not really a problem because he's not going to be coaching him. Hopefully
Yeah.
he's not going to go into Laval. And if
Yeah.
then it's already going to be a problem. So might as
Yeah.
well get benched in Laval then.
All right, so there you go. That pretty much. I mean, like, it doesn't really matter at that point. But I just thought that was a curious thing that should have been mentioned again. It's just like Greg brought up a good point about it last time, and basically that's it, man. Like, I don't really have any concerns. This is a kind of you take a flyer on a guy, and if it doesn't work in 2 years, you shake hands and you roll.
Doesn't even
out.
have to get to 2 years. Even if he has a solid season this year, and next year all of a sudden, Montreal has an idea that he doesn't want to resign. You think you can't flip him the way they did with Sean Monahan for something?
Yeah, and we can retain.
Exactly.
Let's
even
say a 20 goal
retain-
scorer at like 4.35. Like if we return F, it's not disastrous. Like it's movable. It's a movable contract if we retain half of it. So
And the two retentions next year come off the book too. The two
It's
that are
like,
stuff.
you want to know my concern? My concern is that he gets off the plane, he's walking down the stairs, and he twists his ankle. That's the only concern I have.
With everyone.
That some freak thing happens and he gets injured. That's
But
the
I
only
mean,
concern. But I could say that about them all. So
I mean, even then, even if he never plays a game with the Canadiens, and we just put him on LTIR, it's still a good trade.
To be honest, the real answer is the concern should be is that he scores back-to-back 40-goal seasons and prices himself out of the Montreal market and walks, and that should be the true at the end of the day.
Yeah, but even at that,
the biggest problem.
Even at that, to Greg's point, even if he were to do that, it's like you got Harris for a second-round pick, and you got 2 years of Laine. Like, who cares? You got 2 years.
You're talking about concerns. That's one of them. But
And I mean,
Go ahead.
if
Guys,
you look at just Aris, what we see with Aris right now is what we're getting. So it's not like he's going to become a Sergachev and just make us look terrible. I think he's a very good player. I mean, he's serviceable, but I'm not concerned about him becoming a superstar and making us look stupid if Laine doesn't pan out. So I think he's going to be a solid, serviceable defenseman, but the upside is just not anywhere close to what Laine can bring here. And as well, we get a second.
And I agree with Greg. Like, Harris is not going to become a superstar, but in the rare case that he does, right? Because you do see people flip the switch. It's still a risk you have to take, and it's still. I mean, you have to take this trade.
They traded from a position of strength. Again, Montreal had no space. When you look at the left side, you have Matheson there today, not who's coming, but you have Matheson there. You have Gooley there. You've got Lane Hudson potentially there. You've got Arbor Jackeye there. So, like, where was he going to play?
Guys,
he's an everyday third pairing guy who could jump up on the second pairing when there's an injury, not as an everyday guy, but he's got good hockey IQ. He's a responsible guy. He's very mobile. There's a lot of good qualities. He's a team guy and all that stuff. You hear the way he speaks. Harris was a good, serviceable gentleman on this team. But now for the risk, Montreal was trying during the free agency to get a player who could score goals. We heard Marchessault and all that. They didn't want to go more than 2-3 years on guys. Now they got a 26-year-old vet, to Matt's point, and to what Matt said, who can potentially score 40. Potentially. I'm not going to say he's good. It's a lock for 40, but he could potentially score 40, and it costs virtually nothing to get him.
Your defenseman you traded was rotating in as your sixth on a team that finished fifth worst in the league. I mean, it is what it is. And could he, like I said, amount and refine his game and become a second pairing defenseman? Yes, he can. And again, I hope he does. I have nothing but time for Jordan Harris. But where he is today, with what you have in the pipeline now, with the cap space that you had available to do this and take the full hit over, which is what essentially boxed out these other teams that were interested, it's literally a no-brainer. It would have been a criminal offense not to do this trade. If this ended up coming out and then this was the deal and it ended up not happening because the Habs didn't want it, it simply just makes no sense. You're looking at a guy who has some of the most raw goal-scoring skill in the league. And he had a bad rap in two teams that admittedly are not phenomenal markets to play in. And you had a team that had a dysfunctional locker room from, by all accounts, not because of him. And he really didn't thrive in that kind of environment. And then he goes to another team where he had a tragedy in his family. And then he had issues that himself outside the game needed to work on. And it took him out of the picture. Now that that has been worked on, and he seems refreshed, he seems rejuvenated, it seems like he's looking for that passion again. He mentioned it multiple times when they talked to him about how he's excited to come play in this kind of market, specifically mentioning that and specifically singling out Martin St. Louis as a coach to come play for. Anything could happen. He can get 20 points on the season. But as it stands today, right now, I think this is going to be a tremendous year for him. And in turn, very exciting hockey for us to watch as fans and for what he can ultimately be for this team moving forward. My hopes is this isn't a 2-year project. My hopes are he finds his game, they lock him down, and you got another monster weapon in your top six.
Well, I think they're hoping that it kind of becomes similar to like what Jeff Gordon did in New York when he signed Panarin. Something like that, like Laine becomes their Montreal's version of a Panarin.
I mean,
not the same style of player.
Butts off and do a little
That's
dance right here. Could you imagine?
It's not the same player whatsoever.
No, of course not.
And I think that's kind of a lot of you can make those parallels there.
I think that's pretty interesting because, like that's been talked about, and people were like saying, "Are we going to get something like are they going to target someone like Panarin in free agency?" And we're talking about Draisaitl and Kaprizov, Runton, and whatever. And it's interesting to see that, we got someone with like terrific upside, and basically as if we got him in for free agency. Like we gave up pretty much nothing. We gained something from it. Like and now all we have to worry about is the money he's making. But again, in 2 years it's off the book. So I think it's pretty interesting because I think it's maybe the scenario where we give up the less for a future, like someone that could become a huge part. Because if we were to sign Kaprizov or Draisaitl, it would have been for 7 years at 13, 14, whatever $million. And now for Laine, I think it's much more affordable, even though he's not quite the same kind of player as Draisaitl and Kaprizov, obviously. But
no, he's not.
Yeah, not at all. But he's got the talent to score, similar amount of points. Well,
goals.
Not as Draisaitl. That's quite a lot. But I mean, he's got the potential to be like a game changer, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how he does in here.
I 100% agree with you. And I have a follow-up question, which I want to now deviate from the Laine conversation just a bit.
I just want.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm going to give credit to my brother on this one because he's the one who brought it to my attention, okay? And I had to actually go and double-check it. But it's crazy when you think of it that 20 years ago, the Montreal Canadiens acquired Alex Kovalev for Joseph Balej. And there was similar question marks, not about the mental health, or the mental health and all that, but more about his consistency on the ice, the way Kovalev plays and all that. And he became immediately a fan favorite. Now, 20 years later, not at the exact same time, because Kovalev was acquired at the trade deadline 20 years ago, but a few months later, there was still the rumors swirling around on Laine at trade deadline. 20 years later, Montreal Canadiens get Patrik Laine with a lot of the similar question marks as Alex Kovalev. I'm just saying, it's an interesting timeline. I'm not comparing the two players exactly. It's a cool little catch that my brother caught onto on that one. 20 years.
Well, thank you for that little blast from the past for Kovalev there, Vito. What I wanted to ask was, and this was a question I was thinking about talking to you guys before any of this Laine stuff came out. So pretend for a moment there is no Laine. This is 4 days ago. I'm asking you this question. All right. What is your biggest question mark leading into the upcoming season? I don't want to say concern. I would just want to say question mark. What is the thing about the team that you are the most uncertain about leading up to the next season? Obviously, now it would be Laine. What is he going to do? Okay, but put that aside.
Well, personally, like off the top of my head, I would probably go with in goaltending. Montembeault, can he just, I think it was already the thing we were wondering last year, but I think he hasn't quite established himself fully yet in the NHL as a number one guy, and I think if he can become like a respectable starter and continue to play like he has in the last 2 years, I guess, or a year and a half, I think the project about Fowler is going to be a lot much less stressful because we're going to have someone that we can rely on, and it's the same thing about Primo, who was pretty terrific last year. I'm going to say I was very surprised. I think he was he had a 910 save percentage. I think above anything, like if he keeps that kind of save percentage and just keep us in games, I think it's going to be much less stressful to see how Fowler, Velikin, and Dubas turns out, because goalies are very tough to predict. And so if we kind of already have just one of those two that can kind of be a 1A, 1B, like tandem goalie at the NHL level, I think it's going to be like a huge boost for our team long term.
That's
Right
interesting.
on, goaltending.
I think goaltending is important, obviously. Not as important as it used to be. We talk about this all the time, but I do think it is important. And there is definitely a question mark there, a little bit of what's going to happen there. And can these guys, but for me, the biggest question is consistency and progress. Like, I want to see progress from everybody. And I just want to see consistency, and consistency doesn't have to be, I just want to see people play. You know what I mean? I want, consistency from everybody. So Cole Caulfield, I want him to have a consistent season, where, I get scorers are streaky and whatnot, but I want to see him perform and I want to see him reach a plateau. I know he was close to 30 last year. I mean, a lot of people were talking 35, 40. Like, I want to see him progress into that. I want to see Nick Suzuki progress into an actual point of game player, which, I mean, he's doing fine, but I need to see it. I need to see it. If this team is on the right track, we need to see those things. I mean, it's starting to get the time now for this to happen. Uri Slafkovsky, everyone's excited about him, but everyone forgets that he had a half season of, are we going to send him to the Rocket? And I get that it's exciting and the trend was up to end the season, but he has to continue on that trend and he has to keep going forward. And same thing, Laine has to obviously come back, bounce back. Doc has to actually play some games. Can't get hurt day one. You just need a little bit more consistency and no more excuses of, okay, this guy's injured, this guy's that. The Canadiens need to take a step forward. I think it's time now. I think they have their core pretty much set. I know it's still early. I'm not expecting them to contend for a playoff spot. Although, who knows? It's possible. The East is we never know what can happen. But they need to take a step forward. They can't. They have no excuse and no more shelter of no expectations. I think now we just need a little bit of expectations in our lives, and I think they need to match that. And the same is to be said to their defensive core. We need to see Gouli step into his role. We need to see these young guys, Ryan Backer, whoever ends up making that team. We need to see them and see that they could be day-to-day NHLers and with the potential to take that next step. I think that everything is good in theory, on paper, in name. I want to see it on the ice.
Right on.
It was Dave Matt's question was 4 days ago before Laine, but yeah.
So take Laine out. It's the same exact
Same thing.
Okay, so Dave pretty much named everybody. But I'll probably say
Dave's like he wants progression, and Greg is about the goaltending.
My question mark will probably be around Kirby Dach. If I have a question mark, because he's slotted to be the 2C, right? I mean, some people are putting Newhook there and moving Dach to the wing. No, they acquired Kirby Dach to see if he can be that 2C, that big body, 6'4" 2C. So my question mark is there. Is he going to be able to do it? Is he going to be able to stay healthy? Because he's a very young guy, but the injury concerns are definitely there. We saw his skill before that freak injury that he had last year, so we're going to put that to bad luck. However, some people at the beginning of that season, just before he got hurt, were questioning whether he had the skill to become the number one center on the Montreal Canadiens roster. So I want to see if Kirby Dach is going to be that 2C. He's going to pick up where he left off before that injury. You're going to see that his game take that next level. That's one of my question marks. Other question marks going to be on defense. Are the Montreal Canadiens gonna play Goulet on his strong side, which is the left side, or are they gonna mess that up, in my opinion, and put him on the right side? I want to see Goulet, who just signed a long-term contract of 6 years, be the guy who's playing on his strong side and starting to eat those minutes. Especially if you're seeing that you're starting to look at Mike Matheson and saying he's part of the team, but he's not a part of the future per se, not the long-term future anyway. And Jack also, he signed a bridge deal. You guys know my sentiments about Jack I'll always give credit to Dave for many episodes ago, right before Jack even made it to the NHL. He was calling him a stud, all of those things. Can Jack take his game to that ceiling that I've often said, where I think he's got that ceiling to be a strong number 4 guy, and reduce the number of penalties that he takes in a game and play smart hockey. If he can play smart hockey by being that frame, being that tough, physical, and all those things, and use that cannon of a shot a little lot more, we've got a solid number 4 guy that could be a big presence on the ice. Those are my question marks for the season. I'm not mentioning the other ones that I have because Dave and Greg pretty much nailed it. But if I have to give another, it'd probably be Slafkovsky going on. He finished off the season on basically on a 70-point pace. Can he actually hit the 70? Can he be maybe another 30-goal scorer? You know, he was on that pace as well as a 30-goal scorer, or in and around that. Can he take that game to the next level? Because you saw his game, it was maturing right before our eyes, and he was only 19, 20 years old. Let's see what we're going to get from this team now.
My question for you, if I can, very quickly, like and I kind of agree with you in a sense, but if Goulet goes on the left side, who would be your third right? The third defenseman you would play on the right, like who's gonna be the sacrifice? Let's say it's Savard, and then Mailloux looks like he might make it. I mean, who's gonna be your?
We spoke about this, Greg. What was it, 2 episodes ago? I think that because Montreal's weak on the right side, you have to look and say by default, Justin Barron practically makes the team.
All right, but then you look at on the left side, you've got Goulet and Matheson, who are like pretty much set in stone, like they're gonna make it, and so it leaves us with like Jacky, Hudson, Struble. Like,
I think Montreal has. First off, Montreal's over the cap, so they're gonna have to probably make another move. What that move is, I have no idea. It might be somebody on defense once again. I just don't know what that move is, but they're gonna likely have to make a move, and they're gonna have to create space. The other thing too is until they make that move, as crazy as some people might call me crazy, call me nuts, insult me all the way through. One of the waiver exempt players that could play in Laval, not a problem, eat up a lot of minutes, is Lane Hudson. And at that point, you could play Goulet on the left side and play him on a strong side, and not have to worry about that logjam as much. Temporarily is the big word in capital letters, because everybody else would have to go through waivers, and nobody's worth losing on defense right now for free anyway.
Yeah, I think all of you guys make excellent points. Coming back to the question, I mean, goaltending for sure is a big question mark. Progression, I think Dave's point is founded. You're past the point now of giving everybody the okay, it's rebuild, don't worry. I'd still rebuild, but you got to start seeing some momentum. To me, though, I gotta go with Vito on this one. My biggest question mark is about Kirby Dach, and more importantly, the second line center. You have your first line. Your first line is done. Now you have a second line, and you have now that we have Patrik Laine on that line, you got a winger locked in for sure, and you have the makings of the Dach new hook to complement and finish it for now, for the upcoming season. Can Kirby Dach continue to show what he started to show glimpse of? Can he lock that spot down? Because the 2C is a very important spot on the team. Very important. And frankly, if it's not him, I don't know if they necessarily have one in the pipeline that can really come in anytime soon and do it. I think a lot of their eggs are in that Kirby Dach basket. They did a big trade to get him. And yeah, he went down after a game or whatever last season. And that's, it's one of those things. But now it's become part of his, who he is. Is he an injury-prone guy or not? Was he just unlucky at an early stage in his career, and we'll look back that he does the next 10 years, no problem? This is my biggest question mark. I want that to work out. I see so much potential with him being there as your 2C. I think that line, that monster line that we could see out there as your second attacking force is just something that is going to leave such a massive 1-2 punch with your first and second line. I mean,
there is another question mark that
it.
nobody ever talks about. Like I haven't even read it on Twitter or anything like that.
So maybe it's not a question mark. Maybe
no, but it's something to think about because they don't have a power play coach right now. Alex Burrows is not there anymore either. So is the power play what's going to be the strategy there? Because the most predictable thing the Montreal Canadiens used to do is drop that puck back for somebody to rush and get caught.
I imagine it's Martin St. Louis, unless if they hire a specialist. But if they don't, I think it would be him that draws it up, and he doesn't.
Well, even if it's him, what's that going to look like? Because now, for the first time,
can it be worse?
They got literally 2 power play lines that could actually be threats, legit threats.
If it's the exact same, then it was 6 or half a dozen. How could it be worse? They score on their own net all the time? It's the only way it could be worse. This power play did not score goals. It was terrible. So yeah,
a lot of people put blame on Burrows on that and his strategy.
Well, I guess we're gonna find out in the upcoming season. Now that he's gone, if somebody else takes if it's Trevor Letowski or Martin St. Louis or whoever,
he's like one of your paisans.
I just want to see Alex Burrows' reaction when he saw that Patrik Laine was coming to Montreal, and he was like, "Couldn't that have
where was this guy for me?"
If he was the guy behind the power play, he would probably misuse him anyways, just like they were misusing Caulfield at a point too. Like, it's
Anyways, listen.
They need fresh ideas on the power play. Let's just say I don't think Alex Burrows, I would have trusted him with Patrik Laine there.
Bring Alex Kovalev.
Oh boy.
We'll save that for the next one. Who we'd like to have on the table. One last little thing, and then I'm going to throw it to everybody who stuck around to the end to answer some questions for us. Way too early prediction on how many goals Patrik Laine is going to score in the upcoming season. Dave,
give me 42.
Perfect. Greg,
32.
Okay, Vito,
I like it.
38.
You hedged it.
38. 41. Let's go, baby.
What is this? Price is right.
Let's go. Why not? Thank you very much for everybody for making it down to the to the end of the episode. If you stuck it through, thanks very much. Please let us know in the comments. Per usual, we like to always hear your take on the 2 things or the 3 things that we typically talk about in the episode. Today is, what's your take on the Patrik Laine trade? Are you happy about it? Those that were not happy about it in the previous comments, did the trade change your mind with what was actually sent over the other way, or are you still not happy about it? Let us know. We'd love to hear about that. And then, of course, what are your biggest question marks in the upcoming season? We're also very curious to hear. Do you agree with any one of us, or do you have one of your own? Please let us know. And as always, like and subscribe, share, all that kind of stuff. We really appreciate it. And thanks so much for sticking around and listening to a bunch of guys talk about the Habs in August. For Dave, Greg, and Vito, I'm Matt, and this was Get Pucked.